Welcome to Three Questions, where I ask friends and colleagues to choose three questions out of five, and then we talk about stuff. And today I am joined with Rachael Gabriel.
Hello. Hi.
I'm so glad you're here. Rachael is a professor of literacy education at UConn. She has written about a million articles. I mean, I think it says over. I'm just going to bump that up to about 1 million articles, many books, including most recently Disciplinary Literacy, teaching reading and writing across content areas. She is the best tweeter of all time.
Oh, that's so kind.
Xer, is that what you call it now? I don't know, but you write the best
I have not made that
short
transition.
form social media post threads that I've read in a long time. And also, dare I say, one of the best texters in my life.
Oh, thank you. I
Which is-
appreciate that. I've worked on that a lot.
Rachael, you have chosen questions 1, 4, and 5 to answer. Question 1. I'm so excited because I actually don't know the answer to this.
It's like the rock and roll chord progression.
Wait, it is?
Yeah. 1, 4, 5.
Is that why you chose it?
No, but it is. So that's good.
Should be like, it's so in my bones, the music, that I just can't
Mhm.
even when I choose numbers, I choose the
Right. No.
expression.
My music life is very unconscious. I like get caught singing with zero like conscious realization that I'm doing it. My kids are like, "Why are you always singing?" I'm like, "I'm not, but I am." Yeah, and it just sort of like pops out in weird places. Pops out weird places.
You sing all the time? Are you a
I
singer?
do.
No, I love that. I feel like I wasn't a singer until I met Maggie, and Maggie really helped unlock like my ability to just sing and dance and kind of look stupid,
Wow,
look goofy. I know you don't look stupid when you sing. I
that's
do.
so good. No, of course not. I'm not like a dorky side to side swaying college a cappella singer. That's not a thing.
Okay, Rachael. Question number 1
Yeah.
is, what
Yes.
is your educator origin story? And I don't know why I combined 2 questions in one, but I did. How would you characterize your current work? So let's start with origin story first.
There's like I have a few versions of the story. Like
Like different lives you've
like
led,
all of
or
them are true, but like
okay, that's helpful. That's helpful for the
yeah,
podcast, Rachael. Thank you.
yeah. They all are true. I told this story a bunch of different ways, highlighting different paths. But like, when you look back, you're like, that was really important, even though I didn't know it at the time. Or,
Yeah.
thinking about different kind of sympathetic vibrations of like that's the song I'm singing right now and like where those kind of started. So when I was thinking about this question today, I was thinking a lot about, maybe because it's the end of the summer, Camp Ramapo, which is also, this is secretly part of a music story. So I did sing in a college a cappella group, and my favorite when I was a freshman, a senior, who I just really looked up to, was also a psychology major, like I was. I was a psych and English double major. My parents are a reading teacher and a psychology professor, and they asked me to do anything but become a teacher. And so,
You know that I have the
um,
same story, that I was vowed I would never become a teacher or a writer. Those were the 2 things I would never, ever,
I didn't have a block on writer, but I was almost made to promise and then reneged immediately. But I was a terrible waitress, so I started working at a camp for little kids after junior year or after sophomore year, freshman or sophomore year of college, and this senior who I really looked up to, Beth, had always worked at a camp called Camp Ramapo, which is in Rhinebeck, New York, like in upstate New York. It's a camp for kids with, at that point, I think they described themselves as behavioral and developmental disabilities. And so, and I like found myself there. I like felt like I totally belonged. I found like a goofiness and a joy and a lightness and like a fun. And I really felt like I could like do it with my whole body instead of like only being a brain or only being a body. Like I played hockey all the way through college, but I don't think I said 7 words together, like playing hockey. Like you have a mouth guard in. There's a little bit of yelling. There's some communication, but it's like code. It's not. But working with kids is like full on.
Yeah.
Like you need to move with them, and go to them, and especially in like a summer camp setting, you have to play, and play
Yeah.
is not all verbal, but although talking helps. And it's not, it was really like a full integration thing for which was new for me, and also a place where I felt like when I was integrated, I was also accepted. And
Mm,
I'm one of those people that's always kind of felt like a little bit of an outsider in every community that I've been part of. Often proudly, not, that's not sort of like I was marginalized, but just not feeling like at the center of most communities. Um, but at this one, being an outsider, being a little bit different, being atypical was the actual literal point of being there.
yeah.
and uh, and so, like, the goofier, the better, and
Yeah.
the more creative, the better, and the more courageous, the better. And so, I
Yeah.
just found that when I went for it, it worked. And when I went back to school and went back to camp and all that stuff, I didn't want to do anything. I wanted to be with children, period, at the end. I wanted to work with kids. And my understanding of the pathway I would have to take in psychology would be a lot more school and a lot of kind of carrying out the orders of people above me,
Right.
rather than having kind of authentic interactions. And so I became a teacher because I didn't want to leave summer camp, because I really wanted to be, really wanted to be with children all the time. And I became an English teacher because I was an English major. Mhm. Like that wasn't, that was what I was qualified to do. So
Yeah.
uh, that's the short, not that short, but that's one version of the story that
Well, and
spread
there's a
out.
lot of reasons why we choose to do what we do, right? It's like
Totally.
I'm sure there were plenty other considerations going on or other things that
Oh yeah,
happened.
oh
Your own
yeah,
relationship with school, right? All that stuff. But what's
100%. Yep.
interesting is in this podcast, the people that I've talked to, there's like two camps, it feels like. And like one
Mhm.
camp feels like most of the educators are
Yeah.
in line with you in a way, where it was
Mhm.
like the reason why they became a teacher is that they loved kids.
Yeah.
They wanted to be with
Mhm.
kids, right?
Yeah.
The
Totally.
other is loved the work, the like English part of it, the reading, the writing, the
Mhm.
ideas, the
That
philosophy,
is so interesting.
that was me. I loved kids.
And that's how we tend to describe secondary and primary people, although I was a secondary people. Like that's how we tend to think of people in their current work. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so
I
interesting.
liked the literature. I was going to talk about like existentialism with high schoolers. That was my
Um,
whole goal in life.
wow.
It didn't happen really, but
Huh.
that's all right. Anyway,
Yeah.
that is cool. That is very
That.
cool. Grandma Poe.
Yeah.
So, how would you characterize your current work?
I think I've been trying to come back to some of the sort of like basic ways of being that made me love working with children in the first place. And so I've been thinking a lot about like what does it mean to be an educator that has a body, an academic that has a body, and how does it change my work when I leave room for that fact for myself and for others? Like how does that change my teaching, and how does that change what I see in classrooms, and how does that change the kind of work I do and when I do it and how? So I'm returning to some of those kinds of ideas before in a much more like conscious, explicit way. Um, and then the other sort of piece that I bring from my Ramapo days is just the basic value of finding joy in being inclusive. So
Yeah,
like so often the conversations that I have around disability and mental health and chronic illness and all these things is accommodations that are described as like they basically all fall into the category of it's inconvenient. And
yeah,
like
yeah,
it is inconvenient, especially for the like inconvenience is part of that experience. And also, um, there's so much possibility and there's so much stretching of our humanity and our understanding of each other as human. And that is a beautiful thing that
mhm,
gets kind of shoved to the side or erased, or I think like we don't there are conversations where I think there's no realization that it was even there to be shoved to the side or erased. I think about the conversations, seeing this year the Olympics and then the Paralympics, and like how people think and talk about it differently. um, of course they do, and like there is a sort of a textural difference in the way that people see um, others as human
mhm.
or not.
Yeah.
and they might still kind of celebrate them as a cartoon character, but not as a human, because apparently there are conditions for humanity. Like you must have all of your X, Y, or Z's, like, or you must, fit into one of two genders, or you must
Yeah.
um, be similar day by day instead of radically different in your presentation or your energy or your abilities. So, room. I think I've been
Yeah.
thinking a lot more in my work about leaving room, and seeing. A lot of what I'm doing with people preparing to be reading specialists is like is trying to learn really good child watching,
Yeah.
So um, it is about like seeing and being seen, and it's hard to see if you're not being seen. So making the work more human.
So we're gonna dig into this a tiny bit before we move on because
Mm,
of course we are.
okay,
So
cool.
when you talk about, being an educator with a body and kids being students with bodies, and I think you said is always a thing because anytime I hear about stuff like that, right, I always am in this zone of like, okay, I'm in my classroom, I've got 36 to 40 kids in my eighth grade class. Do you know what I mean? And I'm holding on to management and my relationships because I'm new,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Or I'm even
Yeah,
not new. I'm still holding
yeah.
on to that stuff with my fingertips a little bit.
Mhm,
Um, the thing I know is that the thing that helps the kid most in need of something is going to help everybody else, right? I know that,
mhm.
right? So I know that having a more like embodied classroom for the students who
Get a
absolutely
line.
need a more embodied classroom is going to help every kid in my room.
Yeah.
But it's that thing that you said, they're like of like I think teachers, I've felt this before of being like, "Oh, but that's difficult. That's more difficult." Right? And I'm already at capacity and I'm already sort of figuring out how to get
Right.
through my day. How do you
Yeah.
find like do you have like sort of some of the small ways that you see that we can embody ourselves more in our teaching that aren't necessarily adding like tons of workload, right? Tons
Yeah,
of stuff.
totally. I mean, I'm not I think like there are people that are like scholars of this, so I'm gonna give you like real simple things. But the two things that I think about for myself as a teacher are like I have to remember to breathe. Like it's like I hold my breath. I'm a breath holder. Um, I think a lot of people are.
Oh, I'm such a breath holder. Yeah, no, I feel called out.
So one of the things that I need to do is take a deep breath because it reminds
Yeah.
me of like it's not all happening up here. Like there is, there's more. Another thing that I pay attention to is the way I'm using my voice, which I think
Mm,
is because I was a singer, and it also is a way of like using my body to be part of the communication, and that makes me pause more in my
yeah.
speaking. It makes me pause more in my listening and listen more carefully. And so it's not like stop and let's do a brain break, but it is like attunement and
Yeah.
awareness of like, I'm using an instrument to communicate. You're using an instrument to communicate. You don't have to be doing that super intentionally, like, oh, look, the dynamic change, but like,
Yeah.
but just your awareness. We talk about awarenesses so often in developing literacy. And if we're talking about kind of being literate with each other or being a literate teacher, like being able to read a classroom and being able to compose collective activity in that classroom, then it's not like phonological awareness that you need for that, but it is like you need sort of um, a physical awareness, an embodied awareness, an environmental awareness,
Yeah.
an interactional awareness that is sort of parallel in some ways to like phonological, phonemic, book consciousness, like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So I would take a breath and listen to my voice. And for kids, I just try to read, like, what are we doing? And assume that people that we do things for a reason. And I know that's something that folks can get behind, but we forget a lot of the time. Like I always need reminders of like, especially like when I'm frustrated. Like, but what is this doing for them? What are they showing us with that? And it's super easy for me when I enter other people's classrooms to see those sorts of things because I have 100% tolerance for everything. I'm not
Mhm.
ground down by it. I'm not like dealing with 7 months of annoyance about it. I'm allowed to leave and use the restroom whenever I want to. Like all of the, like, it's really easy from the outside to see that. And so I have to think about like, what are my students showing me? And why are they doing what they're doing? What is it? And if it's not working, what is it doing for them? Because it's working somehow.
Serving them in some way, right? It's serving us the things we do, right? It's having a purpose for it.
Yeah. Part of assuming it doesn't have to be intentional, but it does have to be purposeful. Part of assuming that everybody is competent is
Yes.
assuming that their actions are purposeful or their inaction is purposeful.
I
And
love that.
that doesn't mean that it works, but it does mean that like a human's doing this right now. It's not just annoying, right? And it's not just wrong.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they're not doing it to you necessarily, even if they are doing it to you, right? Like even if a kid is saying something very disrespectful to my face.
To you, right. Definitely, which you might feel in your body, and this is one of the times when you wanna be like, "I'm gonna forget that I have this because it hurts."
That's right. That's right.
And I think the only defense you have in the moment, again, is a deep breath. Like, that's the only, armor that you bring with you. Otherwise, you turn it off.
And you're reactive, right? You're reactive.
Mhm.
And then when
Reactive.
I'm reactive, I'm in my emotions and I'm in old
Yeah,
things and old reactions and old issues I
right,
have, right? That I'm now
right.
enacting on a group of kids. Yeah, maybe I should take the breath
Yeah,
first. Hard to
totally.
remember to do. It's hard to
Oh
remember
my
to
gosh.
do.
Oh
It's
my
similar with
gosh.
parenting too. Like I have a friend, Nadine. High five, Nadine. I love you.
What's up,
Um,
Nadine?
when I became a parent, she said one, I mean, she's given me so much advice over the years, but one piece of advice she gave me is that in parenting, you are the thermostat, not the thermometer.
Oh, yeah.
You
I
like
like that a
that?
lot.
Like, and I feel
Yeah.
it's similar. I mean, it's a little different because there's so many and there's like different like dynamics and stuff in the classroom, but I think there's something
Mhm.
similar that I
Yeah.
fail at all the time, right? But that
Oh,
I am the thermostat in the
mhm.
classroom. I'm not
Yep.
only the thermometer. Yes, I'm the thermometer. I'm measuring kids. I'm watching kids. I'm figuring out what they might need.
Mhm.
But the tone is set by me. I'm the one who's in the
Yeah.
room leading the things. And even
Mhm.
taking a second to breathe can
Mhm.
change so much, especially for someone like me. I don't know how you are. I tend to be fast with everything. I can get too fast. I can cut people off. I just have that energy. And so I'm constantly like, slow down, Kate, right? Slow down. Take the breath, take the pause. Let it be a moment of silence, right? All of that. Let the misbehavior for a second, right? Let the
Right.
kids say the weird thing that's off topic for a moment.
Mhm. It's so I wonder if it has anything to do with your that I don't know much about, but like a little bit of a performance background, at least a little, probably more than a little, but at least a little bit of performance background, thinking here's a crowd and I need to perform. I have to project a certain thing. And even folks that don't, right, that aren't like super into musical theater, no, even folks that aren't, which I wasn't accusing you of by any means, that aren't super into that, don't have that as a background kind of underlying the way that they are with large groups. Teachers are under surveillance so much that there's a performative element no matter who you are. And so the
Always.
performance is a separator, right? Where we've got a third wall over here and we're kind of like yelling at instead of being um,
Connected to it, right?
right,
Connected to
doing relational work instead of performance work, which is sort of like being interested in the interaction instead of the um,
yeah.
lobbing, like
Right, right.
the projection.
Delivering the lesson, right?
Yeah,
Delivering the thing, which sometimes has to happen too, right? Again, it's all a
100%.
balance, but, like, if all I'm doing is delivering instruction, right, that's not it.
Right,
That's not it. I love that.
right.
Thank you. Alright,
Thank you.
let's move on to our second question. This is why these conversations originally, when I, thought of this project, I was like, "Oh, they're gonna be, like, 15 minutes long," and they're not. Alright, question number 4. If
Yeah,
you had a motto for teaching right now, in our current circumstances,
yeah.
what would that motto be?
Link arms.
Oh,
Link up with people.
yeah.
I listened to this podcast with actually it's somebody that I taught with a million years ago. Brittany Packnick Cunningham did a talk on and she shared pieces of this on social media and she has her own podcast and there's been sort of pieces of this there too, but she tells a story about this sort of metaphor for doing racial justice work or just justice work in general, and like sort of resisting white supremacy as like if you're on a people mover in an airport, you
Mhm.
need to not just turn around and see that this is happening, not just be aware, but you actually have to sort of fight the crowd. And because this people mover is moving you, just walking forward is not going to actually get you off the people mover, and it's not going to stop the people mover. And no one person is going to like be able to keep running against the tide all the time, let go of whatever kind of whatever ease you had and kind of keeping going the way you were going. No one person is going to make this thing change. You really have to link up with other people in order to go fast enough to get off of it and turn it off.
Yeah.
So I think about, the main challenges of the main kind of social relational challenges of the pandemic, of like feeling isolated and disconnected, but also the way that we like learned a lot about our connection to each other, and how much we need it and value it. And like people were, staying up late to Zoom, and, having Zoomachinos and things like that. I think that there are folks that are feeling, I feel like I'm crazy sometimes, because there are so many messages that I disagree with, that like it must be me. And so reaching out, A, to make sure that it's not, and B, to feel that you have someone to stand with, something that's a sort of solid ground to stand on. I think is important, that even without our sort of current socio-historical context, teaching is and can be so incredibly big. The job, it's a big job. It has a lot of nuance. It is really impactful, and nobody can do it by themselves. And yet, the culture of teaching is this sort of egg crate thing where you shut your door and you do it by yourself, and it's all about you. And that gets reinforced by our accountability policies and our teacher evaluation policies, and all sort of like, if you ever watch a movie or TV show about a teacher, like it's all about sort of like your personality runs the show, and it just like isn't actually about that. I think about, I could probably um, spread out everything I know about teaching and attribute it to the people that I learned it from. Like, and it's not me. Like, I'm being Mia, my partner. When I taught a sixth grade transition class, I was like, they had half the day of reading and half the day of math. So she was the math half of the program that I taught in. I know I'm doing Mia like all the time, as a person, as a parent, and certainly as a teacher. I know I'm
Mhm.
doing you, frankly, Kate, a lot of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I know I'm sort of like bringing those things in, and that's the beauty. But if you don't
Yeah.
feel connected to those people, how the heck can you do it by yourself? It's just
That's
sad, and impossible. It's a team sport, even though you do it alone.
yeah. I think like I feel like this is the story of my 50s now that I'm 50, is finally learning how much I need community. And it's so humbling in my personal life and my professional life. And there's been lots of reasons and upheaval for all of that, right? But like realizing how much I had internalized that sort of message rooted in whiteness, rooted in capitalism, rooted in all sorts of stuff that's beyond me, right? That like it's up to me to do it all by myself, right? That self, even as you say, I'm drawing from everyone around me all the time and hopefully giving, and hopefully I've been a generous person. I'm not saying that, but in terms of that idea of when I'm struggling, what do I do? Do you know what I mean? Like what I tend to do with the messages that I've been given is that I tend to buckle down and try to get through it on my own. And I've done it a lot in the last few years in education and in my life. And to your point, now I'm coming out of that. Do you know what I mean? And this podcast has
Yeah.
been a piece of that, is really trying to like the people I've invited has been kind of random, just people that I haven't connected with for a while, or that I am connected with, but have never,
Oh, yeah,
like just
right
how do we,
on. That's so
how
good.
do we just make these connections? Because yeah, can't do it on our own.
No, we weren't supposed to.
We're not supposed to. We're not
Right,
supposed to.
right,
And I
right.
was told that. I mean, I was told that my day one of teaching. I had a colleague who said, I mean, you could probably guess what she said. She's amazing, but she said, at the end of the day, you close your door,
Yeah,
you shut everybody out. Do you know what I mean? And she
yep,
said it with a good message. She was like, you connect with your kids. She's like,
yeah.
you know, don't worry about all that. Worry about the
Mhm,
students. Very true.
right. That story's happening. And it's in harmony with this other story, which is that we can't be strong enough to do that well if we're not linked up with other people.
That's right. That's right. I love that. That's a good motto. All right, question 5. Why do you think it still matters to teach students to read more powerfully and independently? And the only caveat I put to this question when I ask it is that I am meaning in that kind of like, I have a book and my eyes are on it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
not to put down audiobooks or any of the other things, but I'm interested in this question of just
Mhm.
reading and why that still matters.
Self-determination, period.
Okay. Okay.
It's like it, which leads to all the good things, right? Like freedom and choices and all that stuff. There's currently some wars being fought for like national self-determination. And so when I think about individual self-determination, I think of it as something that you have to fight for and that is worthy of fighting for. It's really is sort of a life or death thing when you think about it. The ability to self-determine across your life,
Yep.
but it starts. You develop that muscle, and the muscle is trained by having an intellectual uh, pathway, and we are part of a legacy that has done a lot of that through books. And
Yeah.
so being able to connect children to that legacy um, is sort of like plugging them in to culture and connection and science and math and like any sort of all of the kind of sources of knowledge. You can
Mm-hmm.
absolutely watch a lot of stuff on YouTube, and you are uniquely part of co-constructing when you are doing it from text. And so your ability to do that um, first gives significant access that like YouTube still can't rival.
Yep.
That talking to your very wise friend still can't rival.
Mhm.
Just in terms of the volume of things that are in print that you could learn from, but also it gives you this sort of experience of meaning construction that makes
Yep.
you a more powerful message getter, message message maker and message getter.
Yeah. No, that's the official term for it.
Right? What is it? Meaning making, message getting. That's what it is. That's what
There it is.
meaning making, message getting. That's there, right? So, which is something I read once. Just say, I mean, it's Mari Clay's phrase, but you do have to, yeah. I mean, even the simplest thing is like when little kids are learning, not even middle schoolers actually, we learn a lot more vocabulary from text than from talk because there's
Yep.
just a bigger range of it in the
Yep.
books that we're reading in school or even the books that you're reading for fun at home. There's a wider range than what people use in their everyday oral vocabulary. And so,
Yep.
if you want to become a more powerful meaning maker, message getter, message sender, whatever that is, then
You did that.
books were like the training ground for all of that. I used to know I had a friend who was a pastor of a church that said that all of the rituals on Sunday for him are like practice for real life. Like this is how we want to practice being together. We want to come together. That's one thing we want to do, and we want to practice and get good at that. And we want to make things together, which is why we sing together, like make a sound together at the same time. And he kind of broke down all the pieces of that. And I think that reading is not only kind of access to things and exposure, like access to the world and exposure to the world, but it's also as a practice ground for empathy and for understanding and for gathering kind of points of reference and material, raw material for later inferences. It's like practice for and fuel for the dexterity and power, the strength and dexterity, really, of being a
Yep.
human person in the world right now. And we can, I mean, saying that, like, we are too print centric because of white supremacy. And
Yeah.
so I think it's part of, language in the vein of language of power, it's part of um, being fluent in having full access to be a full participant in the sort of sources of power in society right now. There are totally other ways to do this, but like this is a big one at this time in our history.
Well, but this is what I was going to ask, right? Because I think I am in line with that, right? I believe that
Mhm.
it took me a second. This is one of those tenets of white supremacy that I was like, oh, worship with the written
Yeah.
word. I was like, but
Yeah.
I had all these like, but. that can't count, it can't be
Mhm.
that. But I'm down. I get it now, right? Of course, there are other ways to do all of these things, right? To co-construct meaning, to
Yeah.
practice empathy, understanding humanity, all of that
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I get that one of the reasons why we ask kids to do this on print is because of white supremacy.
Mhm.
Is there another reason why print is worthy? Because it's hard for me, Rachel, to be honest, and maybe I'll cut this. Maybe I'll cut this. But it's hard for me to be like, okay, I'm gonna devote my entire career to something that really only is being done this way because of white supremacy. If that's true,
Oh, yeah. No, it's not an only. Yeah, I don't think it's an only at all.
but I wonder, right? Is there also a value that is inherent in the act of reading with your eyeballs if you are able?
The reason it's so, so important, the reason it has so much weight, and the reason we can't imagine alternatives is the sort
Yeah,
of influence of white supremacy across several thousand, like at least 1,000 years, like since the printing press, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think the reason that we don't see the alternatives is that.
yeah,
And if we
yeah,
did, if we could more quickly and easily kind of name some of those alternatives, like music, like oral storytelling, like you would be like, well, yeah, I listen to a lot of talk radio, podcasts, news show. Like I'm into the oral storytelling of my context, right? I know there are other
mhm,
forms as well. Um, and you would think maybe like, I don't know, whatever other kind of form of communication that you're super into, whether it's like art or fashion or music or other kinds of things, if those were more obviously part of how knowledge and culture and power were transmitted, if we understood that a little bit better, I don't think it would be taking away from text or literature at all. It would just be there's more. You
there's
know,
more.
it's not only this, there's more.
That's
Um, because at this point, the technology argument that we had before, like for a while, it was like, well, we need to know how to read and write so that you can communicate with people who are not here
right.
over time and over space. But like
Yeah,
that argument, not in our generation has had to reckon with that as a um, fako. Like it was actually like that was true and
it was
meaningful for several
yeah,
hundred years. And
now
now that
it's
we
not.
have these other options, we don't have that excuse for saying that print has to be the one and only.
Yeah,
It's probably going to still be one because it's been part of our practice for so many thousand, not thousands, so many hundreds of years.
yeah,
But it's a relatively new invention that we have loved the heck out of and
yeah,
we continue to love, and it's not going anywhere. And it is it has been joined by other things that just
yeah,
have that we maybe don't have enough imagination for awareness of or imagination for, even if we're already kind of fluent in them. Like
yep,
even if you speak meme, you don't
yep.
speak meme, that's terrible, but I'm so like even if
Well,
you meme, right?
we
Right?
meme.
You know, we
Memeing,
meme.
yep,
We meme
yep,
because we are aware of the possibility and importance of something other than the printed word sometimes,
yep.
and we get together because
That's
we're
right.
aware of the possibility and importance of something other than the written word sometimes. Otherwise, we would just sit alone and write letters to everybody. Like we're not there,
No, we're not there. At least most of us aren't there. Yeah.
right?
No, I think that's right. Yeah.
And yet, like
Yep.
I want my kids to have access to stories, whether
Yep.
someone is reading it to them or not, and
Yep.
to be able to find things on their own that don't come through an adult or that aren't pre-programmed by some like media conglomerate or that aren't coming through like their feed, which is algorithmized. Like I want them to be able to pick a book,
Yep.
open a portal, do their
Yep.
thing in their way.
Yep. Yep. Well, and I think there's also something about the way that I'm reading, like if I'm listening to it, because I listen to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts. In fact, that's my preferred form right now of taking in text. And there's something just really different about that than when I sit down with a pen and read and I can stop. I can think. The
Yeah.
audio part has been interesting to contend with because I love it. My son listens to 2 hours of audiobooks a night, right? Yay, audiobooks. And I see that it's a very different act. It's a very different process. You're practicing
Yep.
different things and you're letting other things sort of atrophy. And it's interesting to be like at the stage where you're like, oh, are we just evolving away from that thing? Do you know what I mean? Like, or,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you're right. I think the idea of that it's being joined, and can
Yeah,
we be flexible enough to not let go of the power of reading
right.
the written
And what
word
it does to our bodies, right? We associate it with comfort, with stillness,
yeah,
with ease. Yeah.
with peace, all that, and then also add in and have the imagination to see how all these other places or all these other modalities can fit in. I mean, I asked that question because, of course, I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot, that, I
Yeah.
see that readings, dwindling, especially
Yeah.
post-pandemic, but,
Yep.
that there's this thing that it feels like there's another little micro crisis going on where kids just aren't reading anymore. And it's interesting because we haven't redefined the profession enough
Yeah.
encompass, you know what I mean? So instead it's like this becomes this like pretend, like they're reading, but you're like, they're just reading little excerpts and like answering, or like they're being read
Yep.
to all the time,
Mhm.
which yay, but they're not doing that. I'm going to take this chapter and sort of contend with it and pull out my
Yeah.
ideas and then
Yeah.
deliver those ideas to my community and see how they fit.
Yeah.
Not all places, obviously, but there are more and more places that I see that are not doing that right as
No.
much.
No, it is the sort of commercialization of reading and the commercialization of the production of print. Like it's coming through, not by or whatever, but it's coming through publishing companies for a reason, because it is a method of constraining and controlling the kind of thinking that goes on. Which makes me think about how there's Audre Lorde has a essay called "Poetry is Not a Luxury," and it's like one of those essays that you want to do close reading on. Like I don't know if you've fallen in love with close reading, but I certainly.
No, I mean, I was in love with close reading, but it's been a long time. So now we're on the outs. We're going to therapy. We're gonna be fine. We're gonna be fine. We just got to work.
Oh boy. I mean, way to do the work, Kate. Way to do the work.
Thank
You need a close read. Poetry is not a luxury as an essay unto itself. And yet, just the title bouncing around in my head all the time is like a really important call to arms. And I think this
you.
is what we're talking about with like what kinds of text do our students have access to? What are they allowed to do with that text? What kinds of text are they invited to produce or create? Like it is absolutely not by accident that it is being dramatically impoverished.
Yep.
And it cannot be by accident that we reverse the impoverishment of the ways that they are invited into literacy in schools. And that
That's
doesn't mean like, yo, they need to read these authors because I said so or someone shot them out of a cannon. But like, it does mean that the whole point is self determination, like learning who you are, connecting up with your, what does Alfred Tatum call it? Your um, your lineage as a reader. There's a term that he uses for it that's really nice that Goldie Mohammed is used to in some of her workshops, where like you're connecting up with a an ancestry of thought, a community of thought. Like you know how Alok the poet talks about his transcestors, his trans ancestors,
yes.
which is sort of a
Yes.
version of chosen family, but also a version of like people who have come before me who are not my blood relatives, but who have like really paved the way for me in who I am and what how I understand the world and all of that. Like you need to find your intellectual ancestors and they're not around you because nobody is like you, but you need to sort of braid together the voices that are out there captured for you or that are speaking now and find them. Otherwise, going back to the beginning of our talk, like it's really hard to feel like you, all of you, belongs.
That's right. Or that you're connected, or there are people to link arms to, right? Because if we're
Exactly.
all alone and we're doing it all on our own, then we can't, right? It all crumbles.
Yep.
So we're ending this podcast now saying that the entire future of humanity rests. No, we are not saying that, but I think you're right. I love the phrase, and where I want to end is that idea, is that the whole point, right, is self-determination. I
Mhm.
think that's really powerful.
So that we can move closer to each other. It's not like I'm going to go self determine over here and you're going to go self determine over there. What we
That's right.
will
See,
determine
I'll do it. I'll
is
do it. My witness will really be like,
right,
no, no, no. I'm gonna go self-determine, and then I'm gonna win, right? Am I gonna win
right.
when I
Almost like Red
self-determine?
Rover. No.
acquire something, right? Yeah, no, is we self-determine in order to be connected and of service to the people around us. Yeah,
Right on. That's beautiful,
it'd
Kate.
be a better world. It'd be a better world.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
And working with
Think,
people like you lets me glimpse it. So thank you.
you know what? Hugs. It's really good to see you.
Good to see you too. Take
Thanks
good
for
care.
joining me.